The National Electrical Code, known as the NEC, does not specify particular requirements for the minimum height or distance to the bottom of a television set that is hung on a television mount. However, local building codes may impose specific requirements for this type of installation. When there are no specific code requirements to meet, it is generally recommended that the bottom of the television set be at least 48 inches above the floor. This height ensures that the television can be easily viewed by people who are either sitting or standing. In commercial spaces, the NEC mandates that all electrical equipment be installed in a manner that minimizes the risk of electrical shock or fire. This requirement means that the television set should be installed to prevent contact with water or other liquids and also prevent damage by falling objects or other hazards. The building inspector's initial height requirement of 90 inches above the floor was likely rooted in safety concerns. The inspector probably was concerned that the television set could fall from the mount and injure someone if it was not installed at a sufficient height. The inspector's subsequent decision to allow the television sets to be installed at a lower height in the corners of the room was likely based on the fact that these locations are less prone to hazards like falling objects. The decision to allow television sets to be installed at a lower height rests with the building inspector, who must weigh safety concerns against the installation-specific circumstances. The NEC is a comprehensive set of standards, but it's not infinitely granular. It sets the stage for safe electrical installations, but local nuances and specific applications often fall under the jurisdiction of local building codes and the discretion of inspectors. When dealing with electrical installations in commercial spaces, the primary goal is always safety. This principle encompasses the protection of individuals from electrical shock, as well as the prevention of fire hazards. The NEC provides guidelines on wiring methods, overcurrent protection, grounding, and equipment installation to achieve these safety goals. Now let's consider some of the specific factors that might influence the appropriate height for television installations. Firstly, viewing angles are important. The goal is to position the television screen at a height that allows for comfortable viewing without straining the neck. This height varies based on the size of the screen, the distance from the viewer, and the typical viewing posture, whether sitting or standing. Secondly, accessibility is an important aspect. In commercial spaces, compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, known as the ADA, may be necessary. The ADA sets requirements for accessible design, including the height and reach ranges for controls and operable parts. If the television is intended to be interactive or if it has controls that need to be accessed, the installation height must comply with ADA guidelines. Thirdly, potential hazards must be considered. The location of the television in relation to potential hazards such as water sources, flammable materials, or areas prone to impact needs to be assessed. The installation should minimize the risk of damage to the television or the potential for electrical hazards. Fourthly, structural support is a concern. The mounting structure must be capable of supporting the weight of the television safely and securely. The unistrut system used in the ceiling needs to be properly installed and rated for the load it will bear. The pipe extending from the television mount to the unistrut must also be of sufficient strength and properly connected. Fifthly, wire management is essential. The NEC addresses the proper methods for running and securing electrical wiring. All wiring connections must be made within approved enclosures, and the wiring must be protected from physical damage. The use of appropriate strain relief is also important to prevent stress on the connections. When a building inspector makes a judgment call, it is typically based on a combination of code requirements, industry best practices, and professional experience. The inspector's role is to ensure that the installation meets the intent of the code, even if there is not a specific rule that directly addresses the situation. In the case you described, the inspector initially cited a 90-inch height requirement, likely based on a general concern for safety. However, after considering the specific circumstances of the installation, including the location of the televisions in the corners of the room and the height of the drop ceiling, the inspector modified their decision. This type of flexibility is not uncommon in the field of code enforcement. Inspectors often need to exercise judgment to apply the code in a practical and reasonable manner. The inspector's decision to allow the televisions to be mounted lower in the corners of the room may have been influenced by the reduced risk of impact or obstruction in those locations. Corners are often less trafficked areas, and the presence of the drop ceiling may provide some degree of protection. However, it's important to note that even in these locations, the installation must still meet all other applicable code requirements, such as those related to wiring methods, overcurrent protection, and grounding. In any electrical installation, it's always best to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer. These professionals have the knowledge and experience to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes and standards. They can also help to identify potential hazards and recommend appropriate safety measures. Before beginning any electrical work, it's important to obtain the necessary permits from the local building department. This step ensures that the work will be inspected and approved, and it helps to protect the safety of the building occupants. Electrical codes are constantly evolving to keep pace with new technologies and safety concerns. It's important to stay up to date on the latest requirements to ensure that your installations are safe and compliant. Firstly, always consult local building codes. Local building codes may have specific requirements for television mounting height in commercial spaces, even if the NEC does not. Check with your local building department for clarification. Secondly, consider edit compliance. If the television is intended to be interactive or if it has controls that need to be accessed, ensure that the installation complies with the Americans with Disabilities Act, known as ADA, guidelines. Thirdly, prioritize safety. Mount the television in a way that minimizes the risk of electrical shock, fire, or injury from falling objects. Ensure that the mounting structure is strong enough to support the weight of the television. Fourthly, consult with a qualified electrician. A qualified electrician can help you determine the appropriate mounting height and ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes and standards. Fifthly, obtain necessary permits. Obtain the necessary permits from the local building department before beginning any electrical work. Firstly, NEC Section 110.3. This section covers the examination, identification, installation, and use of equipment. It requires that equipment be installed according to the manufacturer's instructions and that it be suitable for the intended purpose. For television installations, this means using appropriate mounting hardware and ensuring that the television is properly supported. Secondly, NEC Section 300.11. This section addresses the securing and supporting of wiring methods. It requires that wiring be securely fastened in place and that it be supported independently of the ceiling grid. This is important for preventing strain on the wiring connections and ensuring that the wiring does not become a hazard. Thirdly, NEC Section 400.8. This section covers the uses not permitted for flexible cords and cables. It prohibits the use of flexible cords and cables as a substitute for the fixed wiring of a building. This means that you cannot simply run an extension cord from an outlet to the television. You must install a proper electrical outlet near the television. Fourthly, NEC Section 640.9. This section addresses the grounding of audio and video equipment. It requires that all exposed metal parts of the equipment be grounded to prevent electrical shock hazards. This can be accomplished by connecting the equipment to a properly grounded electrical outlet. Fifthly, NEC Section 725. This section covers remote control, signaling, and power-limited circuits. If the television is controlled by a remote control system, the wiring for the system must comply with the requirements of this section. It's crucial to understand the purpose of these code sections in relation to low voltage, known as LV, installations of coax wiring and televisions. Firstly, Section 110.3 ensures that all equipment, including the TV mount and the TV itself, are used and installed according to their listing and labeling. This means that the mounting hardware must be rated to hold the weight of the TV and installed per the manufacturer's instructions. Improper installation can lead to the TV falling, posing a significant safety risk. Secondly, Section 300.11 is important for securing the coax wiring and any associated low voltage cabling. These cables must be supported independently of the ceiling grid to prevent them from sagging or being damaged. Cable ties, J-hooks, or other approved support should be used to keep the wiring neat and secure. Thirdly, Section 400.8 restricts the use of flexible cords, highlighting that you cannot use a standard extension cord to power the TV. A permanently installed receptacle must be provided near the TV location, adhering to local and NEC requirements. This helps ensure that the power supply to the TV is safe and reliable. Fourthly, Section 640.9 pertains to grounding, emphasizing the importance of grounding any exposed metal parts of the audio and video equipment to minimize electrical shock hazards. This may involve ensuring that the coax cable shield is properly grounded. Fifthly, Section 725 applies if the TV is part of a remote control or signaling system. The wiring for such systems must meet specific requirements for low-voltage circuits, including proper insulation and overcurrent protection. Regarding the building inspector's actions, it's important to understand their role. Building inspectors are responsible for enforcing the NEC and local building codes to ensure that electrical installations are safe and compliant. Their initial requirement of a 90-inch height to the bottom of the TV might have been based on general safety concerns, such as preventing people from accidentally bumping into the TV or obstructing pathways. When shown that the TV units would hang below the drop tile ceiling at approximately 78 to 80 inches, the inspector likely considered the specific circumstances and made an allowance, especially since the TV were located in the corners of the room. This decision reflects the inspector's judgment that the lower height in that particular location would not pose an unacceptable safety risk. The inspector's flexibility highlights the importance of understanding the rationale behind code requirements and being able to discuss alternative solutions that still meet the intent of the code. To ensure compliance and avoid issues with building inspectors, it is always recommended to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer who is familiar with NEC and local building codes. They can provide guidance on proper installation methods, wiring techniques, and grounding requirements. Furthermore, submitting plans to the local building department for review and approval before starting the installation can help prevent misunderstandings and ensure that the project meets all applicable codes and regulations. When dealing with electrical installations, it's always best to err on the side of caution and prioritize safety. By following the NEC local building codes and the guidance of qualified professionals, you can ensure that your low-voltage installations are safe, compliant, and reliable.